Are we recording? All right, thank you. Welcome to the Port of Olympia. Not yet, sorry, you're good. Welcome to the Port of Olympia Commission Special Meeting Work Session, Monday, July 28th, 2025, 3 p.m. Commissioner Chair Vasabita will be joining us late today. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. I won't do motion to approve the agenda. Yes. Second. Thank you. We have a motion to approve the agenda in a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Now we will go to Port of Olympia Business Unit Financial Performance, starting with Swantown Marina or Boatworks and Marina.
Just as a reminder, commissioners, we're gonna give each of the business lines about half an hour with you. I think they've got about 15 minutes to put their numbers for the first half of 2025 in context, and then another 10 to 15 minutes for questions from you guys. And we'll start it off with Damien.
And will we have, when will we ask general questions like about G&A percentages and within the business line, or are we gonna go back and ask you questions?
You can ask me questions, and actually Trisha is probably the best.
Okay. So at the end,
So I think
maybe? Okay, cool. Thank you. Hello, Damien.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm with Damien Egan, Harbor Senior Manager for Swantown. This is the Q1, Q2 2025 financial summary report. Start off with just kind of a structure of Swantown. Uh-oh. There we go. Sorry. Swantown Marine and Boatworks has 15 full-time employees plus seasonal staff. Myself, the Harbor Senior Manager, 4 staff members in Boatworks, 5 in the Marina, and 5 in maintenance. Recently, we hired a maintenance tech 1 position and a seasonal fuel dock attendant that stays with us for about 5 months during the busy season. Plan changes going forward. We'll be hiring a temporary maintenance and grounds assistant for the maintenance crew because we have a gentleman going out on paternity leave in about 3 weeks. And we have a temporary boatyard maintenance assistant starting tomorrow because our boatyard foreman had his son on Friday. And we have 2 in the boatyard that are actually having kids within the next 2 weeks. So they're all due within 3 weeks of each other. It's kind of crazy. So consolidated Swantown operation overview. Swantown includes 3 departments, the 020, which is the Marina, 022, which is Swantown Boatworks, and 024, which is Swantown Fuel Facility. Types of revenue is permanent moorage, transient moorage, live aboard fees, launch fees, dry boat storage, travel lift fees, workyard laytime fees, and gasoline and diesel fuel sales. I started with a consolidated Swantown slide for the last 4 years, starting 2022 to 2025. I thought this was the best way to present this information since our seasonality of the Marina and Boatyard. You can see the trends for revenue has increased for the most part over the last 4 years. And our income before depreciation has gone down slightly, partially due to larger maintenance expenses and some administration costs that have increased. Something to note about administration costs is we changed the calculation in the 2025 budget for how G&A and overhead was calculated against the budget. Operation expenses compared to the last 2 years have actually gone down just a hair. For the Marina, the occupancy for the Marina, I did the last 3 years. Because we don't have great data from 2022. We changed systems, how we calculate that or how we track that in the Marina in 2022. So on the left will be 2023, the middle is 2024, and the right is 2025. Our 28-foot and less slips, there are more seasonal ones. They start out about 30% occupied in January and end up about 60% occupied in June, which is pretty consistent over the last few years. Anything that can be pulled out of the water and put on a trailer usually is taken out of the water during the winter time. So our 32 foot and above slips are about 94 to 99% occupied all year long. Those boats stay in the slips. A note on that, anything over 28 foot, since we don't allow overhang, is in a 32 foot slip. So we do not allow them to overhang, and they pay for the full size slip if they're under. Our storage again is almost at max capacity all year long. That's for our dry boat storage and for our mini storage for the liveaboards. The marina revenues increasing year over year, as shown with the overall from Swantown. Income before depreciation again has gone down a little bit due to those added maintenance expenses and the administration costs, like I spoke about earlier.
Can I ask a question while you're speaking, or is that okay?
Sure.
So when you say administration costs, you're talking about G&A, right?
Yep.
And so are you being billed back when you use it, like marketing, or is that just a straight percentage?
It's a straight percentage.
So
Yeah, I can't remember which one we switched to, but we were based on revenue or expense, and then we swapped in 2025 to do the opposite. I can't remember which way we went though.
I think what happened, and I can get more detail from Tricia and get it back to you, but I think originally we had done it by, I think kind of gone back and forth during the budgeting process, ended up doing it by revenue, and then it just hit the business lines in a way that was negative. And so we went back to expenses just so it had been the way it was before. And so some of the budget versus actual is actually that discrepancy between what we originally had for expenses and how that was allocated versus how we ended up doing.
And these new buckets, that's new though. That's why there's a budget number for these further breakouts under G&A, or is that not new? Have we always been breaking it out by marketing, engineering? We always did that?
I think we always did that. But these numbers are different than what we've always done.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Onto the Swantown fuel facility. On this graph, I laid out monthly, and then the colors are the year for diesel fuel sales and gasoline fuel sales. Pretty consistent with our operations over the last couple of years. January is kind of the slower months for boating, so we don't get a lot of activity. And gasoline sales have increased on trend for the last few years, compared to the last few years, sorry. Diesel fuel sales have actually dropped off. We lost a larger commercial customer last year. The Paso Bay you used to see sitting out on the breakwater dock. They actually sold the vessel and retired. So that was a couple thousand gallons a quarter that they were purchasing that we're no longer getting. And then we had another commercial account that dropped off last year also that wanted a pretty good volume discount that we couldn't provide. They ended up going up to Des Moines where they pump about as much fuel in a month as we do in a year. So they were able to offer that much larger discount based on their sales. So the fuel facility revenue has been up and down over the last few years. This year, one of our biggest impacts was staffing. We had a couple people in the marina office that either quit or moved. One of them had a child and decided not to continue. So we did not have office coordinators for the first quarter at the marina office. So working weekends was not an option to have just one staff member on site. So we ended up closing the fuel dock Saturday and Sunday from December till about March. So that we're assuming that's part of the reason why we have had a reduction in sales. And economy wise, people aren't going out boating as much as they have in the last few years. So again, administration costs, like I spoke about before, and maintenance expenses. Our fuel facility is 8 years old. We're starting to see a little bit of more maintenance on the tanks and the lines as they come into the compliance inspections. We've had to do a little bit more maintenance on them to be compliant. So,
how many gallons do you sell? All I've seen is revenue, so I'm just curious how many gallons.
So we average about 125,000 gallons a year.
Yeah.
In June of this year, we actually hit 1 million gallons total throughout the fuel facility since it opened in 2017.
One of the things at the commissioner conference they were talking about was on the more northern ports, the impact of Canadian boating. Is that an impact on our market?
It can be. We don't have a huge commercial market is one of our issues. But we are the only fuel facility that is operational in the South Sound at the moment. the fuel facility out at Boston Harbor is actually shut down right now. The closest one besides that is Harstine Island. So
So do you think that's, there is a decrease in our budget on both gas and diesel?
Mhm.
And I mean, do you think, if Boston Harbor were up and running, in theory, we've captured some of those sales as
Yeah.
well, so maybe we're down more than we think?
could be, I would assume so. And that's the recreational boating community. Our diesel sales, non-commercial, is usually sailboats and smaller vessels, and they don't get a lot of fuel at the same time. So our commercial sales was what was kind of riding that diesel. So the gas sales have increased this year over last year and the year before, because we do see a little bit more of that recreational activity, and that contributes to our yacht clubs coming down from the northern parts of the sound.
Thank you.
For Boat Works, I broke this out into hauls and launches in the boatyard for year by year with the months in the individual graphs. Pretty consistent with trends in the early part of the season. Our boatyard is traditionally not a lot of activity in the winter months. We have a lot of dry storage in there. We have about 30 vessels that sit in dry storage, so we tend to see an uptick in launches and haul coming in about April when people are moving out of the yard and starting to actually do work. That's that seasonal aspect of it. We start to see a little bit more activity when the weather starts to get a little better. Once again, the yard is kind of trending on that down for the revenue. Over the last few years, we kind of had the anomaly of COVID times where everybody had a bunch of money to put into their boat, and we're seeing a little less of that. And then a little tighter on regulations with ecology for the boatyard has decreased a little bit of the activity there the last year and a half. Once again, maintenance costs have gone up, not as high as the marina or as the fuel dock. We are starting to see some added maintenance to the travel lift because it's sitting about year 10 of a 15-year lifespan. The last one was replaced at 15 years, and it had a pretty significant overhaul at year 10. So we're looking in the future, possibly in 2026, to see what needs to be done to keep that thing operational. For Swantown operations, what do the numbers tell us so far this year? Marina and Boatworks keeping consistent with the trends of the seasonal operations. We're seeing kind of a similarity with the last few years for the first and second quarter. Like I spoke about with the fuel facility, gasoline sales are increasing, but diesel sales have decreased due to that commercial activity loss and the maintenance costs starting to increase. The boatyard occupancy right now has been affected by derelict vessels. We've had a half dozen or so that have been taking up space in the yard that were hauled out through DNR that have been waiting to get out of the yard. We don't typically get rid of them until the summer season. And marina occupancy remains strong in the larger slip sizes, but continues to be mid-range and very seasonal for the smaller slip sizes. And that brings up the future reconfiguration need to be considered with the butt inlet cleanup. If we have to remove dock sections out of the marina to clean up and dredge, we have to look at that configuration of our slip and see if we need to have larger ones or smaller.
Sorry if I missed this, but you mentioned just now that the derelict vessels, you don't usually clear them out until the summer season.
Mhm.
But isn't the boatyard in more demand during the winter season?
The boatyard is busier during the summer season. We have more storage during the winter season.
See.
Yeah.
So it's summer season now.
Yep.
Are they clearing out?
We're starting to get them contracted out to get hauled away right now. We actually had 4 of them hauled out in the last couple of weeks. 4 of the 6 that we had, we're waiting on the contractor to come in and take the last 2 out, which should happen in the next week or so. And they're anywhere from 40 to 60 feet. So they are taking some of our larger spots. Our mid-range, like 35 to 45 foot spots, are kind of the more popular. Those are the ones that come in and out all the time. Anything larger than 45 foot kind of stays for a while because it's a larger project to take on. It takes people a lot longer to do the work on. So
And we have to pay to have them hauled out?
we get reimbursed by DNR. So we do pay and then they reimburse us for it. Typically, the past couple of years we've done it ourselves. We've demolished them ourselves and gotten them hauled out through DTG recycling. But with my staff members having kids this time of year, I can't accommodate that for DNR. We have to actually contract them out this year. It's the last 3 we've done it all ourselves. So if I was full staffed in the boatyard in the maintenance department, then I would definitely investigate doing that.
Good plug.
Everybody's having a baby all at once. Rate considerations, our rate and fee calculations, for the marina, mortgage rates are collected from Puget Sound marinas and averaged for Thurston County specifically, because around 80% of our tenants are Thurston County residents in Swantown. We have a dozen or so marinas throughout the South Puget Sound that are connected to Thurston County, or a little less than a dozen. We are the largest, but in the past, they've typically taken that kind of average of all of the marinas around and considered those rates that way. Boatyard rates are collected on average for the South Puget Sound region, similarly to the way mortgage rates are calculated. We don't have a lot of comparisons in Thurston County. There's only one other boatyard in Thurston County, and that's Zittles Marina. Most everybody's up in the Tacoma and Gig Harbor area or north of that, so we don't have a lot of comparison down here. But the market up there seems to be a little different than ours. We're one of the last do-it-yourself yards where people can actually come and do the work themselves on the boat. Most of the other boat yards require you to hire a contractor to bring it in, or the boatyard does the work itself and you pay that rate. Current rates do not include capital infrastructure or project replacements in the calculation, which I'd like to investigate that a little more. This is the way it has been for the last couple of years before I knew a lot about it. My future rates, I hope to consider facility amenities and end-of-life replacement for equipment and infrastructure, including the travel lift or dock replacement and dredging. Over the last 3 years, 2023, we increased our rates 10%. 2024 was 5.4, which was based on CPI, and 2025 was 5%.
So I had one of the private marinas reach out to me about the aging infrastructure and just concerned that they were gonna have to program that into their rates and they weren't gonna be competitive with us. Is there elasticity in this market? I mean, with the amount of money that we're all gonna have to spend to improve our marinas, are people gonna be able to afford to pay the rates that are necessary to justify the expense?
I would say I hope so, but we're about 25% lower than the Pierce County North market. So we still are in that much lower percentage down in this area. I'm looking at it from an aspect, we have 40-year-old docks with a 50-year lifespan. So we have about 10 years to figure out how we're going to get them replaced. Because then we start having huge maintenance costs on those docks, and the concrete docks won't last forever. So that's kind of the consideration that I have at the moment, is trying to figure out how we toe that line with being mindful of what we need to replace and what we can fix, to make sure that we stay available and open.
I would totally agree with you that our rates need to reflect the replacement costs that's being.
Looming.
I mean, it's like if you needed to replace the roof of your building, you need to be planning for it.
Yes. For the marina operational health key performance indicators, the best metrics that I could come up with for my business line was marina occupancy. It's the key to the success of the business line. If we don't have boats in the slips, then we're not doing too well. And based on our large vessels, sitting in that 95 or 94 to 99% range, that seems to be a good indicator for me to say that we're doing okay. The Boatworks travel lift and yard occupancy. Boatyard operations are dependent on the travel lift moving and being operational and having the space to place the vessels. So keeping that machine running day in and day out, we tend to have big issues if that thing goes down. We have to shift an entire schedule because it's usually not a quick fix. So if we have to cancel half a day, we have to filter them back in over the next couple of days to keep people moving. And then fuel dock operational availability. The fuel dock being available 7 days a week ensures revenue is maximized. And we kind of saw that through the first quarter of 2025 when we had the operations closed on the weekends due to staffing. That seems to be an indicator for us that we need to make sure that thing is running. So, questions, comments?
What do you think the opportunities are for the marina?
As like revenue opportunities?
Financial opportunities.
For if we redesign the marina, dry stack storage, taking those 32-foot or 28-foot and less vessels out and putting them in a dry stack storage where they can be launched into the water, not kept in the water all the time. We have a pretty decent size of the marina that takes smaller vessels that really people don't use very often. They don't have storage at their house, so they either sit in our dry storage lot and then get put in the slips during the summertime and then taken out, stored out. You do less maintenance if they're not in the water. The larger vessels, they can't haul out, so they can't put on a trailer and take home. So having some opportunity like that with the dry stack storage would be a good thing. And
That's like the warehouse where you go,
Yep.
and we would have the market for people who would pay for that here.
seeing our seasonality of our smaller slips, because in that 28-foot and less, that's kind of the prime market for that dry stack storage. We see it, people bring them out and they take them to a storage unit somewhere, in Olympia, Lacey, or Tumwater, and they store them, they pay a couple $100 a month to store them in a facility. If we had that facility on site, and they could keep them here.
That would be using the same travel lift we already have? Or-
Nope. It would be a different operation. They typically use a forklift style. It's called a negative forklift. So actually the mast goes lower than the machine. They pull up to a bulkhead and it's got a set of forks on it. They pick up the boat out of the rack and they set them down in the water and launch them onto a dock that brings them out, so that people can just show up in their car and walk down on the dock and their boat's down there tied up and ready to go.
You get requests from people who are marina users?
We've had interest in it about alternative storage options. We get a lot of people that ask if we don't have room in our dry storage, because we have 2 dry storage lots with about 75 spaces in them. If that's full, they ask the boatyard, but the boatyard is much more expensive to store your boat because it's designed for a work yard, not for a storage. So we do get interest in it on having alternative storage methods, because if people don't have space at their house, if they live in a smaller lot or a smaller community, an apartment, and they want to have a boat, they have to have somewhere to put it. If they can't keep it at their home, they want to put it in schools. So
They're pretty cool.
Yeah.
Facilities.
they are.
They're cool.
Any other questions?
So what about the fuel dock? Do you see any room for, I mean, there's definitely room for improvement, but do you see any opportunities for improvement?
That's a hard one, because I know when the fuel dock, on my research, when it was put in and when it was requested by the commission to put the money into that, there was a little more commercial activity down here. There was Dunlap Towing that was based out of here. They had a barge and a tug and stuff, and they since have closed the business up. So there's not a huge commercial activity draw down here for that facility. It's more of a recreational facility. And the main thing that I look at with that fuel facility is it's not just fuel, it's pump out too. The only other pump out in the South Sound is at Percival Landing, and it's kind of an old system that is in need of replacement. So our guys were actually trying to calc out how many gallons they pumped, and they estimated to be almost 2 million gallons of waste has been pumped out at our fuel facility based on the hours of the pump and the cycle of it. So it's keeping people from dumping over into the water. That's part of our fuel,
Yeah, okay. Well, I appreciate it. It looks to me like you're doing what you can, you're doing the best you can, and you're doing a good job at trying to control your expenses and generally it looks like the marina is operating well, and I appreciate that. I think the killer is that depreciation.
Mhm.
And when we're and specifically the fuel dock, I've had my eye on that fuel dock since I became a commissioner, just
Mhm.
because I do have experience with fuel sales, and I know this is a completely different animal, but at the same time, it concerns me because the investment that you talked about in 2017, which I think was about $2.1 million to build that fuel facility, the projections that the commission based their decision on, not even close. We haven't come close at all. And you mentioned it because of the commercial market dried up there. So that's unfortunate. But I just, I think it's worth pointing out, and for the commission that, especially when we look at future projects, that, this fuel dock, the amount of depreciation we're putting towards that, as near as I can tell, I haven't seen a schedule on that or anything, but near as I can tell, is going to be, we're going to have to continue depreciating that for up to probably into about 2040. And so that depreciation is always going to be an issue for you.
Yes.
And until that comes off, you know, you're just not going to make headway on at least even recovering our investment.
Yeah.
Right now, our investment, our payback period is much longer than the life expectancy of the fuel dock. So I'm not complaining to you because I know,
No.
but I feel like I need to point this out because this was a decision that was you know, the commission made a good decision based on the information they had.
Mhm.
Some factors have come along since that time and changed things tremendously. And, you know, it's one of those things that we're never going to come out on top. And I appreciate your efforts on doing everything you can there. But I just think that's one of the things that we need to be, as a commission, we need to be aware of when we're looking at future projects. We really need to get all the factors.
Yeah, the fuel dock really right now is more of a public amenity than a revenue generating source. And I think part of that is the ecological standpoint of not hauling cans of gas into the dock and pouring them in. So I think the ecological impacts is probably good, but the financial.
Yeah, it's certainly that's there's no denying that, but yeah.
And we certainly haven't fully built out the peninsula, and I mean, we could be driving significant additional traffic to the fuel dock if we had tourism amenities and things that were like the hotel, the restaurant. If people were coming by a boat, that would make.
Yeah.
So I think that continuing to find alignment around our tourism efforts is what's going to improve the fuel dock's performance.
Agreed.
Despite depreciation, despite the projections being different. I mean, we're not going to create commercial activity, I don't think. Are we?
Not that I'm aware of yet,
So tourism,
unless we get a ferry or something like that down here at some point. That's
would a ferry fuel up at Swantown or at the marine terminal or either or?
a great question. I don't know the answer to that. It's a great question.
It's electric.
Oh, yeah, good point. Maybe it's fuel.
If it's electric, it would
I appreciate the format of this presentation. Yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks, Deanna.
Now that Commissioner Chair Vasavada has joined us, she will be taking over the, thank you.
thank you, Commissioner Sanders. I guess with that, we're moving on to the marine terminal.
Yes, ma'am.
Options here.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Afshin Yılmaz, the Marine Terminal Senior Manager. Oh man. And I'm here to discuss the 2025 results, as long as with some history to show certain trends. Just to prepare you for it, one of them will be cheerful and one of them will be worrying, and what we are doing about it and what we need to do about it. So the highlights, as you know, we got two major businesses that we move cargo through, and one of them is paper pulp. And so far this year, we imported close to 40,000 tons of it. So the pulp vessel, since we started this business, it's been organically, gradually increasing the amounts. Nothing major announced, but they used to bring 18 to 20,000 tons. But as we utilized our warehouse much better, and at certain occasions with the residuals managed to store more material, they have increased their capacity that they registered for our warehouse. So we've been getting more like 20 to 22,000 tons each vessel on average. This year, so far, the first vessel was a lower tonnage, and that was because of a problem that they encountered at the export terminal. The next one coming is a 24.6 thousand tons, and that will be the largest tonnage that we are dumping into the warehouse as a record. I don't know how much material will be left in the warehouse when the material arrives, but usually at some point we had 26,000 tons in that warehouse. So regarding this business, the anticipated tariffs that just came out of nowhere recently is our biggest concern. Apart from that, the customer that is associated with it is growing. They are very strong in the United States, and they're growing organically. But uh, So they are growing organically, but of course the tariffs that they might face, and that is 50%, by the way, that they have been threatened with, and that's supposed to go into effect August 1st. So nobody knows what's happening on that front because it was based on a very political action. But that will be a major disturbance, not only with that, with other commodities as well that we're not so concerned about, but we're talking about coffee, car parts, aircraft, orange juice, and that 50% will be a big change. With the log, again, this is one of the bad trends. You will see the tables shortly, and there's been a major reduction in the log vessels that we handle through this terminal. So just you will see on the coming table, but on average we do 20 to 24 vessels on a bad year historically, and it's been going down significantly. Even before the Chinese tariffs, they lost most of the Chinese business, and now there are no vessels that are departing for China. So it's only Japan and Korea. So we are talking about 12 ships a year now, 12 to 15 ships a year, almost half what it has been historically. There are talks of a new customer, a new mill coming online in Japan in 2026 because they had some reductions due to some fire, I believe, a few years back. But even with that, we are still conservatively budgeting for 12 to 15 ships as a general, with the conditions as is. So as I was mentioning, this is a table that represents in the near history, in the last 5 years, the total ships that we handled. So on the very top, you're going to see the total port calls. That's the total vessels we handled. And as you can see, it's from an average of 24 to 20 to 24. It went to 29. 22 was a very outlier for every port due to the container crisis. But after that, there has been a reduction. You can see that 21 vessels in total. And this year so far, we had only 6. The projection for the rest of the year, I want to mention that because it's not on that column. So the total, although these results are to the end of June, I wouldn't go linear on that and predict 12 ships. We're going to have more than that because our tenant has more of their ships scheduled at the second half of the year. So total this year, we are projecting something along the line of 14 to 15 ships.
There's been an unprecedented impact of uncertainty on trade. When you look at our port calls versus other comparable ports in Washington, are they all similarly impacted?
Except for the container terminals. Container terminals are still, especially certain, they concentrated their operations on certain terminals. They seem to be doing so far well, but they are also not sure what the continuing impacts will be. But I think a lot of people were trying to beat the tariffs too. So a lot of front loading has happened. I just came back from the Northwest Marine Terminal Association meeting in Port of Kalama, and the bulk volumes have not changed. For the big terminals, big ports, they are still doing bulk for now. Bulk meaning, since we're in the United States, it means we're sending grain overseas. So it's corn and soybean. Sometimes they fluctuate between each other, but they don't seem to experience a big reduction. It's the dry bulk and project ports like this, they are all getting dried up. Log business is the same across the board. It ended almost in Port Angeles and in other locations. The log business is impacted quite a bit because of the tariffs, I guess, and China's direction for other customers. But there's definitely an impact, especially on the dry bulk side. And on the container side, nobody knows. I don't know. So we are continuing normal with the paper pulp ships for now, again, pending on tariffs. But we are scheduled for 4, and so far they are going to increase their tonnage. So we are always budgeting for 4 ships on that front. We do not do cattle shipments anymore. We used to do quite a bit, but the last shipment that we did was in 2024, only one. And there has not been any cattle shipments since then. There was an attempt, didn't happen. No cattle shipments from Pacific Northwest to Asia since then. This is the same table converted into tonnage. So as you can see, the tonnage numbers are also dropping drastically. And one of the reasons for that is logs. Logs are just a lot of tonnage. Just to make a comparison, like I said, paper ship will be like 22,000 tons, but a log ship that we are exporting is 45 to 50,000 metric tons. And when it comes to other project cargoes, usually tonnage doesn't matter much. If you are bringing, say, log loaders, that will be 6,000 tons to 8,000 tons, or if it's cattle, it's only 1,500 tons. So depending on what you're looking at, it's not a huge metric to go with. But this affects for federal grants, etc., especially when it comes to dredging. They've got a minimum 1 million ton. They don't look at you, below that, and these figures matter then. So losing that much tonnage with the log business affects us a lot. This is the financials. This is the more, despite all these news, what has been going well, although it's hard to see because it's got a lot of years. So this is the last 10 years to 25 to date. And as you can see, normally in the past, before depreciation, the net cash provided to port used to go up and down. And after depreciation, you would see a lot of red and deep into the red. But starting from 2021, you will see a much more positive change. And so the way we are looking at is the entire total revenue on the top, then your operational expenses, which is operating expenses, maintenance expenses, and our internal overhead, and the cost of all operations, including vessel operations and outside labor. After all that, you see the G&A overhead as a negative, and then the net cash to port before depreciation, which is not a cash account. And after depreciation is applied, the net after depreciation values are on the bottom. And as you can see here, our cash position has been changing to the positive quite a bit compared to, although this year, obviously, we are having a shortcoming. It has been going positive as a general, and this is due to our business lines. And again, it's the same information, just to make it more clear, because it was very cluttered with numbers. So you see the teal, I guess, for the revenues. And after all the operational expenses and G&A overhead, the green represents what's left cash to the port, what the marine terminal provides. And as you can see, there has been quite a bit of an increase on that. And the dots represent the position after depreciation is deducted from that. And even with that, we are going just a little bit above and below. But I believe everything is we will be bringing that dot above that base level too, as much as the cash position, obviously. Our depreciation is quite heavy. And this is the financials, same information last 5 years. And you have seen the similar information with the 10-year table. And you can see that just like the marina, our depreciation is quite high amounts. So when you look at things after depreciation, it's not looking as bright as the cash position. Obviously, it's a very large amount. This is if you take everything cumulative, basically the last 5 years, if you said, okay, with all these figures, what's left? So with all those figures, this is just a cumulative chart. 32 million revenues, 20 million OPEX, 3.3 million G&A, and the marine terminal provided $8.1 million net cash to the port. And then $8 million of it went away with depreciation with a net non-cash position of 0.1 million. This has a much lower value at the very end if you take the last 10 years. So this is what the last 5 years kind of did better. And again, I'm going to show you a deeper look just to go into a little bit more detail. But before I show it, I wanted to explain those categories, because normally when you look at the marine terminal financials that comes with the reports, you will see a lot of categories of revenue, operations, expenses. And if you wanted to ask me a question of option, which one is tenants, which one is vessel operations, which one is what, that will be very hard to aggregate that. So that's what we wanted to do here for you, to aggregate them. So clearly show, okay, what part is coming from tenants, what part is vessel operations. So in that context, the vessel operations and costs are all tariff items, everything that's related to vessel operations, all activity, all expenses. So that includes the tariff items that we adjust once a year and charge, like dockage, wharfage, service and facilities. These are per ton. Dockage should have been down there. I apologize for that. Dockage is charged per vessel length. And then costs are, of course, outside labor, ILW labor that we pass the costs on to the customer with a markup, equipment maintenance and fuel, and any other prep that we had to do for those operations. Running costs, that is your burn rate. This includes everything except the G&A overhead that we pay to the port. So this includes our internal overhead, like my salary and the other marine terminal personnel salaries, all the outside professional services we use, janitorial services, anything that we would need to do to run that terminal, whether we work or not, whether we do a vessel or not, and that's our burn rate. And that again excludes the G&A that we are paying to the port. So with that, as you can see, let's take as a whole year 24, we made close to $6 million vessel operations, and you can see the cost of those vessel operations and what we made net revenue from those vessel operations in 2024. And then right below it is another blue line item, which is revenue, net revenue. You will see the tenant, what we make from our tenants. And this doesn't include the, as a side note, this doesn't include certain vessel operations that are related to tenants. So those vessel operations are still in the vessel operations category. And what would the revenue for tenants? That would be all the land leases, the utilities, the markups that we apply, everything that's related to all the tenants that occupy marine terminal properties. And on the bottom, you will again see the expenses running cost. Again, this is the burn rate minus the longshore labor. That longshore labor and all the outside professional services we use for the vessel operations will be included in that upper category, just so it's all about vessel operations. And then on the bottom, that running cost is, if I open the door 1st of January and close it 31st of December, that's what that costs us, plus the G&A expenses overhead section. So let's call it right now close to $4 million in 2024, if you rounded it up. And on the bottom, again, you will see the net cash position for the last 5 years. Again, it's except for this year, it's a jolly trend, unlike the vessel operations. So the reason we are displaying this here is, you might ask me why our tonnage is going down so much, has been going down. Our vessel numbers has been going down significantly. How come the revenue and the net cash position have been better compared to the larger number? And here is a partial answer to that. Here, what we are displaying is some of the info from the previous graphs. You had the net vessel operation revenue per year. And then I believe the number of ships are indicated there or not. I didn't indicate them. But we have a slide at the very beginning. You have the number of ships for each year. So what we did here is revenue per number of ship. So how much money we are making per vessel. And that metric has been going up significantly, and that's because of the new diversified cargo that we are handling. So on average in 2021, if we made $67,000 per vessel, and we came up with those financials, this year, for example, so far average, we have done $150,000 per vessel, and 2024 is a very similar number. Again, this is another simple indication of previous graphs. The ones that we displayed on the deeper look section just simplifies everything: tenant revenue and vessel revenue. Here, I would like to indicate something. After 2000, so tenant revenue, because it's based on land leases, and mostly the larger portion of it is the service and facilities and lease that we charge to them. And you will see that after its level 21 and 22, and then after 23, it has increased, and that's because of the changes that was implemented regarding the flex areas. So we have been charging significantly higher for almost 1/3 of their entire operation, starting from 2022. So that's because of that, you have that increase on the tenant revenues, which usually should be more or less level. Of course, the vessel revenue section is up and down depending on the number of vessels and activity. Again, this one is revenue versus expenses only. So in the first column, you will see again the tenant revenue, which is that green, the vessel revenue, which is that blue, and that other revenue, gray. And then on right next to it, you will see the light orange, that's the running cost, the entire running cost with OPEX, and then the G&A overhead. Basically, this is without depreciation, the net cash position chart over the years. Again, notes on all these are basically what I have been trying to explain on those graphs is included in these notes, because we are doing better cash position per vessel. Financially, we are buffered right now, as of now, from that severe drop in the number of vessels. However, this doesn't mean we are in a comfortable position, and there are significant challenges ahead, and we are going to have to diversify and increase business that brings revenue. So these figures are showing that somehow right now we are not in a horrible position because of the loss of vessel numbers, but we need to diversify and increase our revenue sources.
Option, I'm proud to see the characterization of our marine terminal as able to provide nimble, creative, and dynamic approaches to new business. My question for you is, have you talked to the Port of Seattle or the Port of Tacoma as they are increasing their, planning to build more break bulk capacity? Have you talked to them at all about the opportunities for partnership and what we offer?
We haven't had talks through that. We have some partnerships that we are thinking about handling other types of material and cargo, but regarding going after break bulk projects, we haven't talked about that partnership with those ports. I think the most of the traffic that we will be handling, the way I look at it is what's going to go to Seattle is going to go to Seattle due to geography. And what's going to come to us is if we can bite it, it's going to come to us, or it's going to be exported to us. Again, that's because of the geography. That distance between us and Seattle is not much on cross fly, but when it comes to trucking costs and else and all the emission costs that comes with it, it's horrendous. And so there are certain things, it's not like a simple choice of should we go to Olympia or should I just go to Seattle? With certain cargoes, it might work. Cargoes that headed for east, way east, they're going to put it on rail. It doesn't really matter if the starting point is 10 miles off the rail or 40 miles off the rail. But if it's going to nearby locales, I think where it's headed is what we are targeting. So I don't see a lot of cooperation on that front. But that's my 2 cents.
Is there anything with the massive infrastructure at Port of Grace Harbor with their soybean meal that we can piggyback on as far as, does that then create significantly more train traffic from the Midwest that then is going back empty? Like, is that, am I just,
So that major bulk business, it's not something that we're gonna be able to bite into. That needs
totally,
huge infrastructure, a lot of investment. We have tried that with some material that was departing Port of Vancouver, and we tried to get into that business and try to handle large amounts of bulk. The initial investment is too high, and to find that valuable cargo that the customers are willing to amortize that cost over a certain years is difficult. Whereas Grays Harbor and the river ports will be handling large bulk shipments for the time to come. Also, there are draft challenges. So the river is 43 feet. We are here 39 feet at the dock, 30 foot on the channel.
there's no like thing that follows the big, because I think they said they're at $300 million or something on this new facility that's going in. Much of it private money and.
There are significant investments going in other river terminals too, to handle large amount of material that doesn't have a lot of value when it's handled in small quantities. But for us, there are opportunities, definitely, for not as a major bulk terminal. Also, it will be very difficult to do that kind of business in Olympia.
Sure,
Bulk is a
I wasn't.
very dusty. It would be very significant higher cost than other terminals to suppress that dust to make it suitable for Olympia.
Right in our downtown.
And just indulge me in one more economics question. So with China's market slowing, are you seeing economies like India purchasing logs? Do they have the infrastructure to mill? Where are they getting their lumber to build with their massive population boom? Or is it just not hit yet?
I'm not sure about India, and that's a bit of a warehouse question because they are finding their targets to export to. And as far as I know, right now they're concentrating on Vietnam and they're trying to get shipments to Vietnam. I haven't heard of, I can ask that question and find out. So could be.
Where the future is?
Yeah. They are still going strong with Japan, and they're trying to get bulk shipments to Vietnam. At the moment, they're only sending containers to Vietnam. So here again, I wanted to mention that as you see from those figures, we've got a sizable tenant portion as well as vessel operation. So that's also a buffer, obviously. There are significant, and perhaps some of them, because of the uncertainty, unfortunately, right now, there are some headwinds ahead, and this goes for everybody. Some of the things we're a little bit more isolated as a small port, but also a lot of small ports are running after the same little pool that these tariffs can affect significantly. Like I heard, the steel is getting affected already. And again, despite this, there are really opportunities out there that if we can employ, go a little bit more aggressive, and we can handle. There are still opportunities out there.
What? Like what?
I don't know if I can get into it right now, but there are cargoes out there, export material from wood chips to shredded tires to different products that they are finding hard to find places to do business, and not for very legitimate reasons. So again, there's this mid area that is missing. What I mean with mid area is you have this large, big bulk ports that are handling millions of tons of cargo. And when somebody approaches them with much smaller quantity, but still need a covered area and all that stuff, they don't get the attention they want from those ports. And if there are small obstacles, it's not so, those ports don't necessarily work so much to it because it's not worth to them. But it's different for us, and we can make that happen. So there's a market there. They need a place. They cannot work with big ports. We can handle it here, and Again, there are opportunities. Some things, if there was no tariff on Brazil, cargo like paper pulp will still be coming and growing. And again, as a small port, we managed to get that and we can continue to do it. The last stuff that I'm gonna go very quick about is when it comes to the running costs and the projects we want to do, everything we want to do, I wanted to point out the cost aspect that we are facing. So you saw on the running costs quite a bit of a flat diagram, and that's another portion that we have managed to keep our costs down. So it was gonna go way more up. Everything we do at the marine terminal, every time we set the tariffs, even with interportal committees, etc., there is talk of CPI, but most of our stuff is actually not super related to CPI. So what are we doing in the ports? We are doing asphalt, we are doing paving, we are doing roofing, we are doing industrial equipment, we are getting electrical contractors. So most of that stuff is not huge components of CPI. So when you look at those components, which this data is from the Federal Reserve's economic data portal, and it's up to date, you can see what we are facing in ports when it comes to costs. The first one is engineering services. When you look at your outside professional services in all your business units, this is not just limited to the marine terminal, you're gonna see engineering consultants for almost all projects. And the cost of that has been going up significantly and very steadily. The gray areas on that, if you are curious, the columns indicate the recessions. And they are kind of compressed in some of the other charts because of the scale on the bottom. Industrial equipment. And again, some of these, what you didn't see with the engineering, that was a very linear since the beginning. Here you can see a bit more steep curve, and that's all pandemic, what happened after the pandemic. And look at, this is the industrial equipment. New warehouse building construction, since that was the topic of the year. Look at the cost. One would wish we built it before 2020, but the cost of everything is going up significantly. It kind of, you will see the flattened curve on most of them, except a few in 2024 and forward. And then this is something that I believe even real estate deals with more than us, actually, with the marine terminal. Non-residential building maintenance repair. You can see the costs that are going up. So if you took all of these and made your own custom, which we did, custom inflation index, if you may, and compare it with CPI, because every year when we come out and say CPI is 3.6%, so we're going to increase this rate this much. But when you look at that, if you just compile them, made your own weights according to what we spend, how much of our business is roofing, how much of it is asphalt paving, how much of it is engineering services, electrical contractors, you will see that we're significantly 2 to 3% higher than CPI on long term. Short term, it has been even worse after the pandemic, but on long term, these costs are higher than CPI. So that's when you aggregate it over 10 years and it's always 2 to 3% higher than CPI, that's something to think of when it comes to the cost of running these businesses.
Always appreciate your creativity, Ocean.
Any questions?
Well, I'll just say that I think that, you know, if you consider the federal trade policies that have come up in the past several months, I think we're doing pretty good at the marine terminal. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, you mentioned the depreciation and the significant amount that you're having to deal with there. I'm sure you have a good handle on that. Do you have any sense of any relief from that? I don't really know what we're depreciating completely there, so.
There is actually a great question. Thank you. Because depreciation, so when it comes to the clear cash, we feel good, very good. So when it comes to depreciation, we have been feeling good because I think we as a port, as a team, as all of us, we have a better approach to it now. So I believe organically we're going to see better because now we are trying to say, before we spend money on something, before we invest on something, okay, this is not just a matter of finding funding, even if it's grant funded, because grant or not, we are depreciating it. So even if it's grant funded, we don't look at it as, I mean, it's still taxpayer money at the end of the day. It's still our money. And we are thinking, okay, what revenue we're going to get from it? Is there any reason? Some things will not provide revenue. You have to fix certain stuff, but we have to balance it. So we have a very clear picture of what we need to do. So eventually it will change. At the same time, as you've been aware, just as an example, in the marine terminal, we are trying to shed assets that we don't need. We got rid of the rail cars, and we are surplusing left and right whenever we see opportunity to get rid of something that we can easily lease or not just keep there, basically. So I cannot say that we're going to have a, boom, next year, $600,000 depreciation. I wish, but I think in the long term, we have at least we are in a better trajectory, I think.
Option.
Thank you.
There are those who there are some people in our community who don't necessarily value having an operating marine terminal. And one of the things that I try to communicate is my support for maintaining a deep water port, which I believe provides some resilience to the community that's hard to quantify in terms of the business case. One piece of information I'm looking for, and it appropriately doesn't show up here, is what kind of costs we assume anyway for the marine terminal out of obligations, possibly for defense or emergency services. I'll follow up with you outside this meeting, but I'm looking for information about, to the extent, if Weyerhaeuser disappeared as a tenant and all of the business dried up, wouldn't we as taxpayers still be supporting in some way the marine terminal? And so what would we be supporting and what? What would be the ongoing obligations for maintaining the facility?
To maintaining a deep water marine terminal for the federal government. I mean, even if it's not local, so I think for this.
Let's follow up because I would love you to come to another meeting and share that.
Absolutely, anytime. I believe we need to maintain it, but we also need to maintain it being financially very responsible. Our mission is to make that marine terminal run with operations and also keep providing cash to the port so the port can do better things with that cash. And we want to be above depreciation, always in the blue. We don't have to make billions of dollars. We're not trying to be Wolf of Wall Street here, but maintain a functioning marine terminal for the country when it's needed, and it will be needed one day. And at the same time, provide opportunities for exporters to get their material out. There are examples of it, and that's literally our mission. And but we want to do that definitely not consuming taxpayer resources. Our operations should be able to pay for themselves. Any other question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've been roughly 30 minutes per briefing, so we're kind of on track. I'm going to call up the airport next, and I need to take a point of personal privilege and step outside. So I will be right back, but please, Crystal, let me hold you up.
We're all.
Or maybe
Perhaps there's a.
okay, let's change that. We're going to take a 5-minute break for people to.
Here you go, Chris.
Everybody wins.
Good evening, Commissioners. As Mr. just advised, I'm Seth Pelini, the Airport Senior Manager. I'll be giving the Q1, Q2 financial summary for the airport property. Before we get into it, I'll just got it. Thanks. So when we talk about the airport, there's actually three different departments of the airport. You have the 010, which is the airport as you think of it, is the airfield, the aeronautical use areas of the airport. 012 is our airport Newmarket Industrial Complex, which is west of the airport or west of the airfield. And then you have 014, which is Clean Water Center, which is a smaller parcel to the north of the airfield. The types of revenue that we see on the aeronautical or aviation side is hangar, space, office, and land leases. And then also fuel flowage and landing fees make up a small percentage of that. For non-aviation, we have industrial park land leases, industrial and retail space leases. This is just a pictorial image to kind of orient everybody. Inside the blue outline is all the airfield. Inside the orange to the west of the blue would be the Newmarket Industrial Complex. And then the small yellow trapezoid at the top is our Clean Water Center property. Altogether, those three areas make up just under 1,300 acres, and we have a team of staff that supports that. So we have full-time port employees that are allocated 100% of the time to the airport, which I would define as full-time or FTE. And there's also full-time port employees that are allocated less than 100% to the airport, because there's some of their time is allocated to other areas of the port as well, and then seasonal workers. So we have currently four full-time employees. That's myself, our maintenance foreman, and two maintenance technicians. Four temporary employee, or not temporary, but part-time employee positions, which is our office administrator, the real estate senior manager, properties manager, and lease administrator, and then up to two seasonal workers for the summer months. The only change in this, and I'll show it on this next slide, the only change in this is our office administrator at the airport in 2026 will be moving to 100% allocated to the airport. That's due to some staffing changes at the port and reclassifying that position to provide more support for the airport. So moving into operating revenue, again, this is operating revenue, so capital projects are not included in these numbers. I'll start with just an overview of just the progress as a whole. So all three of those airport property areas consolidated. On the left-hand side, you see the year-to-date numbers. And then for expenses and revenue, and on the right-hand side, you see the what's budgeted for the entire year. So you can kind of see a track, a progress record of what we're working towards for the year. And you can see on the right-hand side of that graph, you can see our year-to-date net revenue before G&A and before depreciation is just under $1.1 million. And then when you take account for the G&A, but before depreciation, then that net revenue drops to about just under 600,000. And then add in depreciation as well, and we drop down to just about $100,000 in net revenue after G&A and depreciation. And now we'll dig into each department in more detail. So now on the left-hand side, I'm comparing year over year. So I'm comparing last year, 2024, just those first 6 months, so year to date, and then in comparison to 2025 year to date. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the revenue breakdown. So you can see most of the airport, and that's the airfield. This is the aeronautical revenue. Most of our revenue is from hangar and office rentals and land leases. And then you can see fuel flowage and landing fees make up just a small percentage. And then license and miscellaneous been passed through. And licenses, just so you know, those are like access licenses or license agreements for one-time use fees and things like that we actually have several throughout the year. So just want to point out a few things on that. You can see the decrease in the budgeted revenue for 2024 is actually higher than the budgeted revenue for 2025, and that's because we actually had some vacancies. The most noticeable vacancy that's accounting for most of this is our WashDOT terminal. WashDOT Aviation, as the state has been consolidating their lease footprint for office space. They also moved out of our terminal building. So we have had some interest. We had been working with some potential tenants, but nothing has come to fruition yet on that building. But we did account for that in last year for this year. So we did account for that. That's why the budgeted amount is lower. And then of course you can see there's also no, because there's no new development opportunities at the airfield as well, not until we have a habitat conservation plan. So there's no opportunities to budget or anticipate new growth. So We'll talk about that more in a little while though. For the New Market Industrial Complex, which is the area west of the airfield, you can see that a majority of that is made up into two categories, the land leases and space and office rental, which is on the right-hand side of the graph. And again, the rest of these slides will be 2024, 6 months versus the 2025, 6 months, just for comparisons. So you can see the rent increases. For the actuals, you can see the actuals is a little bit below our budgeted amount. And the main variance for that was that we had anticipated some option fees in the start earlier in 2025 than they did. So that's why our first half of the year is a little bit under budget. So, and then for Clean Water Center, again, you can see how it's made up. The revenues are made up on the right-hand side of the screen. I do want to point one thing out. So space and office rentals, 100,000, land leases about 73,000, and then pass through came in at 70,000 in the documents that you received. We did identify after you received those documents that there was a calculation error that has been fixed, but it wasn't in time for your paperwork. So that will be reflected in the Q3 numbers later in the year. But what I did was you can see the darker orange on the 2025 actual showing about a $40,000 reduction in for the correction on that error. And it's still, so that shows that we are actually under what the budgeted amount for 2025 was. And that's for a couple of reasons. The main reason for about that $20,000 is we had a tenant that a state tenant that we were waiting to sign paperwork last year, and then so we felt like it was comfortable to put it into the budget for this year because we were right at that budget season last year. And then right at the end zone, everything got canceled, so we lost that revenue that was budgeted for this year. So just for all three property areas consolidated, this is what the revenue looks like 2024 over 2025. And again, you can see just again, without new revenue opportunities, we rely on the rent increases that are built into the lease contracts, as well as the rent adjustments on hangars and a few other options that are set by the commission each year. So we are limited on that new revenue right now until that HCP is in place. And then moving over to operating expenses. Glad you appreciated that. So assuming you're laughing at that slide, but anyways, so these are, again, this is 2024 versus 2025. And again, the variances for the expenses are on the right-hand side. So unlike in the revenue, so the revenue for the airport is not very seasonal. Just the fuel flowage and landing fees are a little bit seasonal, but that makes up only a couple percentage points of our revenue. Whereas otherwise the revenue is not seasonal because it's all leases and rents. Whereas our operating expenses are seasonal. And so you're going to see some variance between the actuals and the budgeted, because the budgeted, we essentially just took half the year and cut it in half. But really, we don't see our expenses really start showing up until the summer months when we're actually doing a lot of our construction and maintenance repairs. So that's why you're always going to see the actuals for the expenses being below. Another reason why you're going to see that is we also had a full-time employee that was allocated for this full year, but they didn't start until July. And so yeah, that first half of the year where we didn't have any payroll to pay for. But other than that, we had some professional services, and then M&R, which is maintenance and repair to hangars, and then M&R wetways and taxiways that have not been spent yet. So that's why we're under budget. For New Market expenses, New Market, mainly those are mostly just land leases. So we have a much less expenses there. Most of our expenses are landscaping, vegetation control, and tree, things like that. And we also have some roads that we own and parking. So a little bit more predictable expenses year to year in our New Market. So that's why it's significantly less than you saw for the aeronautical side. And then for Clean Water Center, again, these buildings are owned by the tenants. This is kind of like New Market controlled expenses. And again, this is seasonal. Water usage is much higher in the summer months. There's also some pass through in that water amount as well. And then M&R, maintenance and repair, again, we'll see some of that get spent as we get through the rest of this kind of time. And that's our consolidated airport expenses year to date. So you can see not too much higher than last year. Again, we did plan for budgeted. We still planned for an additional employee this year. We were also looking at ways to be more efficient. And just as one example, we had counted one on the few slides ago at about $80,000 for some work on the runways and taxiways, but we were actually able to do a kind of piggyback on the FAA project while it wasn't grant eligible, we were able to get an additive bid with the contractor, which helped us get save some on mobilization. So actually helped us quite a bit. So that actually will bring in that project a little bit under for this year, which will be nice. So what the financials are telling us so far this year, consolidated revenue is within about 1% of the budgeted forecast. Full year revenue is expected to remain consistent and on pace with the first half of the year, again, because it's not seasonal. Operating expenses are expected to come in under budget. And that's again due to our full-time employee that just started in July instead of at the beginning of the year. And then maintenance expenses are expected to come in at or under budget based on project estimates, recent project estimates, and some contractor quotes that have just came in. So we're pretty excited to see some of those numbers a little bit less than what we were budgeting for. So that's always positive. So some of the challenges, again, I kind of mentioned this already, but you can tell that without an HCP, without our habitat conservation plan, we really don't have very many opportunities for new development at the on the airport properties because we're a critical habitat for 2 species in Tumwater. And that makes us really susceptible, very sensitive to vacancy rates and turnover because we don't have a lot of variety in our revenue streams. And of course, as Option showed in his presentation, the rate of annual revenue growth is below the rate of rising operating and maintenance costs. So long term, there's definitely some nervousness there that as the HCP gets postponed, as our revenue opportunities get postponed as well, and as we look for ways to account for those higher than expected costs in maintenance, construction, and concrete and things like that, while not having a lot of ways to increase our revenue.
I have a question about that. In the case of the airport where so much of your revenue is the land leases, does it suggest that we don't have the right escalator in those leases, or the income, do we know that the income there is rising commensurate to the rate of operating and maintenance costs, or is it a different indicator?
So I'll talk about that on another slide here shortly, but you know, when airports were originally built, they were originally built at a time when there was a lot of federal support for them, and there was also a lot of money set aside for them as a result of that. And so a lot of most of the airports, there's a little over 3,000 airports across the country that are part of the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, or what the FAA calls the NIPIAS. And originally, we're talking the last 75 years, a lot of those airports, they got a lot of help from federal grants. But as we've seen, there's a lot of pulling back over the last 30, 40 years in the federal government and their budgeting. And so airports have been forced to start relying on themselves to pay for some of those maintenance costs and operating costs that historically grants were more eligible for grants. A perfect example of that is it was a lot easier 30 years ago to get grant money to build a set of hangars, whereas now that is such a low priority on the FAA list because there's so many primary infrastructure projects like runways and taxiways that you couldn't get grant money to build a revenue generating project like hangars. So that's one of the problems. So when you had these airports that say, just using simple numbers, that only had say 10 hangars on the airfield, you still have the runway and taxiway infrastructure system. You can only put so much burden on those 10 renters to cover this facility when originally that wasn't the original financial plan for how airports were supposed to function. So the perfect solution is allowing us to develop those areas that can be developed to offset some of those costs. So for example, just with the 2 leases that we currently have in play, the lease options we have right now between Panattoni and Swire, both of those, I believe it's $4.1 and $2.1 million each annually in rent, right? So what is that? That means that's unrealized $6 million a year in just land lease rents that we're not receiving right now because we don't have an HCP. What could we do with $6 million a year? And that's not accounting for any other additional development that may or may not occur on the airfield itself. That's just those 2 leases that already exist, right? That would allow you to put together a preventative maintenance. I'm kind of going out of script now, but we'll get to that here in a second, but I'll jump to it. But well, never mind, I guess I'm on there. But that allows us to do preventative maintenance programs. Actually, we actually plan ahead 5, 10, and 15 years to actually do preventative maintenance. You're not reacting to major asphalt repairs and things like that. It also allows us to pay for the mitigation land that we need to maintain in perpetuity as part of that HCP program. And then that $6 million can also go towards things like emerging technologies and green energy, things like Commissioner Vasabali, you sat in on that Beta Technologies presentation where they're talking about the charging stations for the new electric aircraft that are on their way into the market. One of those chargers just alone is $750,000 without the land infrastructure to bring the power to that charging station. So some of those revenue sources that are not realized for us right now, if we had those, it'd be amazing what you can do and be part of that green energy and emerging technologies leadership as we move forward in the coming years. And Commissioner Vassal, you had asked about partnering with other airports like Chehalis Airport. I have been in touch with the Chehalis Airport manager. And so we are working on partnering together, not just the two of us, but several airports in Washington State, going after some federal grants for some of that infrastructure, for statewide infrastructure development opportunities. I wanted to share that with you as well.
Thank you.
So to the other part of your first part of your question, so how are rates and fees set? So current leases, any current leases, there's already fees set into them. They're usually historically based off CPI adjustments, and then every 5 to 10 years it'd be a fair market value assessment based on what the industry is doing. For hangar rates, those are annual increases set by the commission each year. For 2023, 24, and 25, they were 5%, 5%, and 4% respectively. And last year I reported to the commission that WashDOT Aviation was working on a hangar rate study because what we've been learning in the industry, at least in Washington State, is a lot of the airports would call each other and see what they're doing and what their plan is for the next year. And they all kind of talk to each other and make sure that, well, that sounds reasonable with what you're doing, but at the end of the day, that's not really how you should be basing it. As we heard from our previous presenters, Damien and Option, we should be looking at, okay, if we have an asset, what should we be charging for rent for those assets so that we can maintain those assets and then replace them? And then in the airport's case, you have, we'll use hangars as an example. You have a hangar on an airfield. The rent should, in theory, cover the future replacement cost plus maintenance cost, but it also should contribute some percentage of the total operating cost as a whole for the airport that user uses, tenant uses. So those are things that we are looking at. So as I was mentioning, WashDOT Aviation was going to be doing a hangar rate analysis statewide. That is either on hold or I'm not sure what's going on, but it hasn't been going through. So we're doing our own right now. And so I will be bringing some recommendations to the commission later this year as we go through the budget season on what I think we should do based on what we're seeing in the industry. And as you saw in Options presentation, the rising costs of maintenance and repair and replacement. So aeronautical land leases, land lease rates don't change yearly. They're usually reassessed every few years or unless there's some sort of significant change. So you can see for our aeronautical lease rate, that was reassessed in 2024 with an 11% increase. And I wish I had the answer if you were going to ask me when was the last time it was raised, and I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get it for you if you'd like. And then the land lease rates outside of the aeronautical is set by Port Policy 1101. So the key performance indicators that I've been looking at and will continue to look at, these aren't all of them, but these I think are the three big ones, is occupancy rate. Is occupancy rate so too high? And like in our case, we have a hangar wait list of 3 to 4 years right now. What is that telling us? And that kind of goes back to what I was just sharing about how I'm going to analyze our hangar rates as we look at the replacement costs and stuff moving forward. And then hangar lease rates proportionate. And again, we already covered this, but just to read it off, hangar lease rates and it's not just hangars, this could be any of the buildings that we own, right? That are proportionate to future asset replacement costs with proportionate contributions to airfield operating costs as well. And then of course, our ability to fund a preventative maintenance program. My goal has always been at every airport I worked at is to shift the airport, if it didn't already have it, from reactive to proactive, because preventative maintenance programs in the long term are significantly cheaper than reactive maintenance programs. And so that's what I'm trying to shift us to. And that's literally my goal. And with that, I will happily answer any questions you have.
I just wanted to jump back to the ACP or HCP, sorry, on that reactive proactive note. That's a good way of kind of framing it. So if we're just waiting for the HCP to get done and going to react once we get a decision, is there anything we could do in the meantime with the lands that we have? Is there any vacancies or any development opportunities? Market Center or Clearwater Center? So
for Clean Water Center, it's a small development, and the only area that is left to develop is dependent on the HCP. City of Tumwater needs us to do some road improvements in order to develop the last part of it, and that can't happen until we have an HCP to it because of the Gopher. We don't have Larks in that area, but we do have the Gopher over there.
Well, you can't even use the H building until the HCP is done.
Correct.
I didn't know.
Correct. And then as far as New Market, all of New Market, except for those parcels that was presented to the commission for lease already logos here. All of it, that's all gopher habitat as well. So that's all dependent on the HCP. So what we're trying to do is one is identify potential mitigation lands, and that's something that the team is working on through the HCP process, and just trying to look at what we can do. Just have our ducks in a row. So when it does look like it's finally coming, we don't have to wait until the HCP is in place. Maybe once we have a final HCP that's approved by US Fish and Wildlife and moves to environmental, maybe we start looking at what kind of steps we can take at that time when we know that it's imminent at that point, and start making some risk analysis on spending funds at that point.
I see. Thanks, Chris.
One more thing, so thinking again about being proactive on these projects, maintenance and whatnot. So with the understanding that the revenues generated by the airport and the airport properties are restricted to use on airport projects or airport operations.
I would clarify that and just say to support the airport. So for instance, 26% of the port's G&A is covered by the airport's revenue. So anything that legitimately supports the airport's function and operations can be billed to the airport. So in that way, that's how the port would benefit from the revenues there.
Okay.
One of them.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you for that. So I guess my question is how do we track that money so that the money that the airport that is dedicated to the airport that you could possibly use for some maintenance project?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure, Alex, put you on the spot or not. You want to talk about what we're doing, take the steps we're taking to do that, but
I think historically, we have tracked it through an Excel spreadsheet. And I think there's been some concern about sort of tracking it as accurately as we need to do. So we are currently doing a forensic look at it. We've hired some forensic accountants for not a whole lot of money, but they're going to take a hard look at that and really help us right size historically airport revenue and what should be dedicated to the airport proper, where the airport may have where the port mothership may have lent money to the airport to cover certain things. So we'll get that all tracked, we'll get it right sized, and then moving forward, we'll be tracking it separately.
and I'll let our controllers correct me if I say something wrong here, but also I think one of the options that we're exploring moving forward is to set up like an entity that only exists on paper, where the airport looks like it's its own little entity. So as money will have to pass through that entity.
Yeah.
If you can explain that better than I can, but
Speak from here. Come on up.
Come on up, just so that you get caught on the mic.
So the current accounting system.
To introduce.
Oh, thank you. I'm Tricia Miller. I'm the controller at the Port of Olympia. The current accounting system records the costs and revenue for the airport. So we are tracking it. It's more of the past on how it was done and to make sure it was done correctly. But we have the mechanisms in place to make sure that we're tracking all of that now.
So then maybe in the future, when we're looking at financial statements for our purpose as the commission, would that include, and I know this isn't the right term for the port, but a balance sheet for each of the different lines of business?
We could, that would take a little bit more work to get it into those buckets, because we don't necessarily look at the balance sheet in that frame. So, but it could be done. Yeah, it would just take some more work. Yes. We can work on it.
Thank you.
I forgot I have a question for Chris, not for Tricia. I am one commissioner, but I think restoring commercial service at the airport is going to support our community. And one of the things that came up at the commissioner seminar was a commissioner said, I never would have moved to Wenatchee if there wasn't commercial service. Is there any information about what having commercial service does for your, as far as emissions on the road, as far as economic development, the full picture of what adding commercial service would offer to our community?
So the way that timeline process would work is if an airline contacted us and showed interest in coming here, it would have to be some sort of formal interest for the FAA to acknowledge it, which for an airline would mean they'd have to give us some sort of letter of intent that would be made public. At that point in time, then you could solicit from the FAA funding to do assessments and like planning projects, which would include an environmental assessment that would assess all of those questions.
So it's like you're just waiting until it doesn't happen unless there is interest.
Correct. Those environmental assessments are multi-year assessments and millions of dollars. And so you definitely, it's not something you want to do unless there's a legitimate reason. And of course, if you go through the FAA's timeline, then some of that can actually be paid for by FAA grant funding to help subsidize that cost.
It makes sense because
Yeah.
if you didn't know the airline or how many flights
Right.
were coming in and out, how could you assess the environmental impact?
Totally.
Yeah, it's literally, yeah, you'd be guessing, you'd be guessing if you knew they were gonna come or not. Yeah,
Chris, are you in conversations with any commercial airlines?
not at this time.
Is there any old data around when Big Sky was flying that shows that data for those flights to Spokane or to, previously? Does that exist? I
As
don't
far
know.
as the emissions increases and
No, more so like the cars it's taking off the road. That's what the way it's. I'm looking at not just the spectrum of impacts. Because you're gonna take, it might have traffic impacts, it might have economic impacts, it might just the whole spectrum of what it actually does. I'm wondering if maybe that happened before when we had commercial service, because it wasn't that long ago when we did.
I could look and see for you. I don't know.
Because that might be interesting just as far as the considerations and the pluses and minuses. I think we talk about additional noise and additional things like that. And I think it's fair that we look at also the spectrum of impacts.
Yes, and those benefits are definitely there. I think getting a detailed answer more than just a 30,000-foot view, pun intended, is you'd have to know what airline wants to fly here and where they want to fly to help you know where those.
That's why just maybe the Big Sky Air data might be interesting without, that was the airline that used to fly out of here.
I'll see if
And did Horizon ever also, or just, no?
not sure.
Yeah, anyway.
I'll look and see what we have historically if there's anything available.
And Commissioner Evans Harding, I don't know if I saw it in an appendix for our FAA master plan or somewhere else, but I have seen a list of sort of the most likely 6 destinations where Olympia.
Salt Lake, yeah, I think I saw that.
That's the most recent, maybe that's something you could share with the commission, re-up wherever that was from.
That's in the appendix 4-1 from the master plan. That's in that commercial feasibility study. And that was just, again, that was a high level view approach based on, CTAX volume, popular destination locations. So there's a little bit of, educated guessing in that. But that is available on our website. It's the 4-1.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to real estate and then we have capital projects. I would like the commission's help in keeping these next 2 presentations to 20 minutes apiece. So we'll have a 10-minute break before the next meeting.
I'll move quickly. Hello, for the record, my name is Mike Reed. I'm your Community and Economic Development Director. And I will be talking about consolidated properties, which as we get into it is not the best name for what we're going to be talking about. Consolidated, I think oftentimes gives the folks the idea that I'm talking about all the real estate. And in fact, consolidated properties is not about all of the real estate. So when we do talk about all the real estate, here's just to give you sort of a quick snapshot on that. And you heard some of the presentations before me at the marina, with Chris's presentation at the airport, even in the marine terminal. Austin talked about there are land leases in those business units, and so those actually go to those revenues go to those business units. They do not come to consolidated properties. So as it is right now, we're going through and preparing for 2026. So I can take a look at what we're anticipating for leased revenue. So real estate revenue, all real estate across all of the departments. So if there is a transactional document in place and there's a revenue number to that, I've added it up. And this is what we think for 2026. So we think that there's about almost $4.5 million in total real estate revenue, ground leases, space leases, license agreements, and things of that nature. About 3 million of those are in Tumwater, and about 1.4 million of those are in Olympia. The tricky part is those real estate revenues and expenses get spread over about 9 different budgets. So, but there is one specific budget item that we call consolidated properties, which it's just those yellow pieces. That's all consolidated properties is. So it's not a consolidation of everything that we have. It's just the yellow. So it is the yellow pieces plus something that we call properties overhead. And I'll explain a little bit more in that. So Market District is the one right in the middle. North Point is the one at the top. And East Bay is the one at the bottom. In consolidated properties, we call it kind of the 06 series. So it's 060, 062, 064, and 066. There's actually only 16 total ground leases in consolidated properties. There are 12 ground leases, 1 space lease, and there are 13 license agreements. Those license agreements are actually, they're parking agreements where it's a short-term deal where somebody's leasing some extra land for us for property. Consolidated properties as a total is only about 31 acres of port property. So it's really not even all that large. In that, there's 12.12 acres of leased land inside that district. So existing leased land, there's 12.12. There's 7.45 acres left remaining to be developed. And then the balance of that is unleasable non-revenue generating land. So roads, the port plazas in that district, Batdorf and Bronson, which we just bought that's in that district. There's a stormwater pond in that district. So we've carved out pieces in that district that we will not generate revenue off of either. All of those, the asterisk, there's not really asterisks on those. Those estimates on acreage, those are not survey accurate. That was Mike using Google Earth and drawing lines and making some adjustments, but I think we're pretty close. So what's going on in consolidated properties? Our revenue this year is actually up from what the budget is. And my guess, I actually just think that there was a calculation in there that was not accounting for some percentage rent that we actually get. Percentage rent is a type of rent that you get associated with a lease. Some lease will pay you a price per square foot, and some leases will say, I'll give you a certain percentage of the revenue that I'm generating on my site, or some blend thereof. I think that there was just a misassumption of that. You'll see that our operating and maintenance expenses are significantly exceeding what we had budgeted for. I'll hop into that, but the short story is it's about how we allocate staff and staff time to this district. So again, it's 31 acres. And it's absorbing a lot. We've allocated a lot of staff time to this district, or this budget. So here's what's going on with that. So in 2025 budget, we anticipated a breakdown of staffing expenses associated with this on the top part. So 20% of the director of operations, 65% of the real estate senior manager, which is a position we don't currently have right now, 48% of the property manager, and then some time of maintenance staff. What we have done, though, is we have put my entire salary as the director of community and economic development into this whole budget. And we also put the administrative assistant, which is also sometimes called the lease administrator. And this is the lease administrator for all of the port's leases. we've put them into this. And so there is some cleanup that I think needs to happen for future budgets to allocate these correctly. And I think that once that occurs, you'd get a better reflection of actually how this one is performing. So I'm not going to go through and I'm not going to show you line by line how each one of these districts is performing, because frankly, in some of them, there's only 1 or 2 leases. I don't think we need that degree of analysis, but I do want you to know what's in each district. So we're going to take the Market District. It's the largest district first. It's about 17 acres. There are 2 developable sites remaining. You can see those outlined in green. There's sort of the green blobs in there on the right-hand side of the screen. And there is
What is this?
at the top of the the farmers market and the roundabout right in front of the farmers market, that's Capitol Way. So
Okay.
does that help orientation? Okay. So like another thing too, inside this district, you have the Port Plaza. Now Port Plaza, some of its expenses and maintenance expenses are going over to government services, but the revenue potential of taking a piece of water, organizationally, we decided we're going to take a 1 acre site right on the waterfront. We'll never generate revenue from it. We're going to improve it as a community amenity, and we're going to leave that there, as opposed to leasing it out, generating revenue. Same thing is true now. We took what was Batdorf and Bronson, a revenue generating lease for us. We bought it, removed the ability for it to generate revenue for us, and now we'll start incurring expenses like maintenance and so on for that. So this district took a swing. We just carved out a piece that was generating revenue and a tenant that was responsible for their own maintenance. And we brought that in, lost the revenue, and gained the maintenance requirement. So there are 7 leases and 3 license agreements. Just very quickly, I'll kind of go through those. The 2 at the top, I don't know if I really would even count those, but one of those, that Olympia Rotary Club, that's just a little spot space lease for them to put a statue or some sort of marker for the 100-year anniversary of the Olympia Rotary Club. The next one is associated with where the Parthia would go in the farmers market. We dedicated that space over for $1 a year. The next ones, you can see it's Market Center building generating 180,000. Market Center parking is almost 70. Anthony's 100. Marketplace 125, and the farmers market is 130,000. And then you can see our short-term parking agreements that we have south of that there. So it's generating about $641,000 in revenue. Not bad for a 17-acre site, frankly. Yes.
Mike, when we dedicated that space for the Parthia for $1 a year, did we have a policy in place, or it was just something the commission as a group could vote on and that choice?
I don't know the specifics of that. Wasn't here specifically when that choice was made. So I don't know all of the rationale on that. I have seen instances, and I can show in East Bay that there has been ways where we've effectively taken a piece of property that we thought would add value to the broader district by its presence, by doing something. East Bay has the East Bay Plaza. We discounted that because it would have a district-wide value in doing so. So I'm guessing it was something along those lines. North Point, it's 5.5 acres. Half of it is theoretically developable. This is another one though. We used to have revenue coming in from KGY, and we used to have revenue coming in from Holbrook. Now we don't have revenue from either of those, but we do have the maintenance expense associated with the 2 buildings that have been left behind. So that one took a swing, not in the positive section. So Hearthfire pays us about 63,000. Actually, this KGY antenna should actually probably not be in North Point, because technically the KGY antenna is on Cascade Pole, which is actually in the Swantown Marina district. I should have said too, I'm going to go back real fast. Those districts are defined by your comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. So that's how we're creating these various boundaries. These aren't Mike just drawing lines. These are embedded into the port's primary planning document.
Is that why Swantown Fuel Dock is treated as its own thing as well? It's the way it's treated in the comprehensive plan?
No, actually I think it's looked at as a line of business separate. So it gets pulled out from a budget standpoint and articulated that way. And I think that was done so we can understand how it's performing, more clearly. If it was embedded into the whole of Swantown, it might be a little bit harder to extract. But you can see here, we have multiple districts on the peninsula, from Swantown Marina, Swantown Boat Works, and the Marine Terminal that aren't part of this peninsula properties or this consolidated properties. I'll keep moving forward. Our weirdest boundary yet, that's an odd one. That's East Bay. And I've extracted out the property that we will be closing on the city will be closing on relatively shortly. With the Children's Museum. So we've sold off actually a good, probably half of this district over the last 15 years with transactions with the city and lot. It's a total of 8.5 acres. There are 3 developable sites remaining. There are 4 leases on this site. 2 leases are with 1 tenant in Urban Olympia or Third Gen. They 2 names.
The gas station in the corner.
Yep, that's the gas station there. So we have this is the breakdown of this district. Tom's Outboard is leasing space from us, generating about 40,000. The Westman Mill or Urban Olympia project is about 125,000, and the gas station is actually generating $134,000 a year for us. Now it's a space lease, so with that comes the obligation that we own the building and everything that positive or negative that comes with it. But the 134,000 is it's a fair amount of revenue for this district. Some challenges and opportunities that I see for the 060 series. We have had a decline in revenue generating leases, and that's because either we've bought the property or the lease has turned has been eliminated. With KGY or Holbrook, those leases were eliminated. And Batdorf and Bronson, we bought the property, thus ending the ground lease payment. There is an increase in operating and maintenance expenses because we now own those buildings and the maintenance requirements that comes with them. Also, and this is a sort of a continuing theme, you've heard this from other presenters today, that some of the things that we have, they're getting older. Roads, parking lots, the infrastructure is aging, and so the cost to maintain those increases. And then the other sort of opportunity, I think, is that staff allocation schedules should be reviewed to correctly reflect ultimately how we want them to. From a revenue growth standpoint, and it's the same story that sort of Chris shared, our ground leases, these are transactional documents. Some of them are 20, 30 years old. And it was in that document negotiated at that time that the schedule of how the thing increases over time was determined. So there's not a whole lot that we're going to be able to do about increasing those. You're subject to the contract that was negotiated at that time. Sometimes that works well for us. Sometimes it doesn't. But where our best opportunity is for new ground leases on undeveloped property. That's how this budget code or the 060s will generate new revenue. There's about 325,000 square feet of remaining undeveloped land. Putting that into a developable scenario where you're doing a ground lease is how you would generate new revenue. And I don't think I think honestly, your number could be anywhere between, I've seen leases downtown at $1 a square foot And I've seen leases downtown at over $2 a square foot. So you can take that remaining developable and you'll probably generate somewhere between $325,000 to $650,000 a year in new revenue should these properties be developed.
For instance, the waterfront center building.
Yeah, actually, that would not hit this budget.
Okay. Because
That's in the marina. So that's where it gets tricky. The waterfront center, developing the waterfront center doesn't do anything to improve the budget for the 060 series.
And is there still a consideration of the properties being allocated to the business lines, similar to how the airport has the supporting real estate?
It's a good question. And yes, I think we're still kicking that around. I mean, ultimately what you'd be doing is taking these 3 yellow blobs and either assigning them to the marine terminal or assigning them to Swantown Marina. The challenge I would have right now in doing that is North Point being half developed and increasing its maintenance costs. I don't think that really actually helps Swantown Marina. That probably, I mean, if it were developed,
Well, yeah,
fully it would
motivate us
to develop it.
to activate the site.
Correct.
Utilize the asset we
Correct.
have.
Yeah.
I just think that consolidated properties, as you pointed out at the very beginning, is really misleading
I agree.
to the public, let alone internally. And so finding a way, it completely ignores the realities.
I completely agree with you, Commissioner, and I think at a minimum, it needs a name change. I don't think that calling it consolidated properties is the transparent way to communicate about what this budget item is. This is the I don't want to say extreme, it's the Olympia properties that don't have a business unit operating on them. So it's not affiliated with the marina and it's not affiliated with the marine terminal. It's sort of this additional land that we've developed land leases for. Now, what we want to do with the revenues and the costs associated those, either assign them to a business unit or leave them as a funding source for community. I mean, what they've ultimately done by putting my salary into this exclusively is it's now the funding source for community and economic development. I mean, largely. So you could look at it in a multiple different ways, but I think that clarity on what it is needs to be improved. Any other questions?
Just to clarify that 060 properties overhead is just for these 3 districts, not any other.
It is, except for, I mean, it's supposed to just be for these 3, but my salary and the lease administrator are all in 060. So while I may go work on a project to support Damien on doing some upland development at the marina, my time isn't being charged there. It's being charged at 060. Or if I help Chris out with something in Newmarket, or the lease administrator is managing, 94 different leases, only 17 of those exist here. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Perfect timing. All right. There's a lot of Go Huskies, Go Cougs talk.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is James Summer. I'm your Public Works Program Manager, and I'm going to be going over 085, which is Planning and Public Works. So today, in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about our 2025 capital projects, kind of where we are with each of the projects. Briefly talk about a 10-year capital plan and the 10-year maintenance plan. So to start off, again, I'm in 085, the Planning and Public Works Department. Our team structure is currently of 2, myself and Hannah Ellis, who is our contract specialist. So between the 2 of us, we are the 085 department. So I came prepared to talk following the previous presenter's information talking about financials. However, due to the seasonality of construction, when I started pulling numbers for what we spent to date on projects, it really isn't reflective of what we've spent, mainly due to that right now is our main construction time period due to the weather. So a lot of invoices haven't come in yet. We haven't been billed for work that has been complete. So I thought what would be more helpful is to just go through the projects that are on the 2025 capital list, talk about where we are with them, and then if you have questions about a specific project, I can try and dig in a little bit deeper. For the first one, the Boatyard Stormwater Pond Media Replacement Project, that's an easy one because it's on hold. The reason it's on hold is the next project on there, the stormwater treatment system, is the first project of the series. Once we get that treatment system in, we will then evaluate what needs to be done to the pond, if anything. So again, it's kind of on hold until that second project kicks off. For the stormwater treatment system, the design has just recently been completed. I believe we are going to send that over to Ecology either today or tomorrow. They have a 10-day window just to review the project specifications, plans, and if they approve, which we estimate they will, then we will go out to bid. We are currently targeting construction in September timeframe for that one. The next one on there, the Boatworks Yard expansion. That one again is also somewhat tied to the second project. So this is the project where we are going to expand the physical slip capacity at the yard. We are in design right now, looking at the different ways that we can expand and maximize that capacity. Some of the issues that we're running into are not even issues, but some of the complications. We are trying to make sure that the stormwater system, which it has, can treat the new expansion. We've also run into some issues where we have water lines that we weren't aware of or that I wasn't aware of that are conflicting. So there are some setbacks. So we're doing some slip reconfiguration just to make sure that we are following the city code for that. And we are currently targeting design through the rest of this year and then moving into construction next year. Originally, I was hopeful that we could get that done this year, but we are doing our due diligence and making sure we get it right. So unfortunately, the construction for that one will likely be in the next year. The Boatworks derelict vessel demolition pit. So as Damien talked about, we're not currently doing demolitions in-house. We are contracting those out. However, we are looking for a long-term solution where we can do these demos all year round. So for this one, we are working with one of our consultants to do a feasibility study. The funding for this is not for construction this year. It is just to look at the feasibility. And we're looking at across the street, what we call the shark fin, and just seeing what those costs would look like, what the stormwater implications are, and get an understanding of what that project would actually cost should we decide to move forward with that. So the end goal is by the end of this year to have a feasibility study, know the true costs, and then if it's something that we think pencils out, then we will bring it back for next year or potentially in future years to actually fund that project. The next two, the Boatworks equipment forklift, that has been purchased. So that one is complete, as well as the vehicle replacement we did purchase. And so that one is also complete. Moving on to the marine terminal projects. So these first three that have merit at the end, the berth one repairs, the maintenance facility, and asphalt paving. These are all multiple year projects. When I say multiple year, we have until 2030 to complete these projects per the grant. Where we are currently at is the grant paperwork is going to be submitted in the next couple of weeks, and we will finalize that grant, and that'll allow us to start drawing funds from that grant. It's about a $9 million grant, $12 million total between the three portions. We did get some approval, so although we are incurring costs now, we got approval to spend dollars, knowing that that money is going to go towards our match. It's about a $3 million match for those. So again, this year, it's really just getting the grants finalized, getting the timeline in place, and then we will, through the next year, 2 years, we'll move into design, past the 30% into the 60, 90%, and you'll see those on the 10-year plan. The next one on their storage facility, we are currently in design for that. We are looking at a couple different items currently. So the facility itself, the fabric structure, the foundation, that's all pretty cut and dry. We are looking at redirecting some of the stormwater to the stormwater treatment facility as part of the construction. Because of the size of it, it will require us to treat some of that runoff. So that's partially where we are in the design. The other part of the design we are currently working through is the fire protection. Due to the building, the size of it, there are some requirements for coverage, which could potentially mean we need fire protection pumps, could need a generator. So the design on this one, unfortunately, is taking longer than I had anticipated and probably told you in previous briefings. But we are looking to get our permit submitted with the city and probably the next month. And that will really start the next long hurdle. The city has about 120 days that they can take to review the plans and permit it. We had a pre-submission conference with them to try and get their questions up front to hopefully speed up that process. But the goal is to break ground this year on this facility. And the sooner we get approval, we'll be out to bid and we'll start actual construction on this one. The last item on here, the warehouse lighting system upgrade. So this is an upgrade to the lighting system that is in our current warehouse. We're working with our on-call electrical designer. We've selected some fixtures, some LED fixtures that we think will be an easy swap. And so we will finish the plans and specifications for that and then also go out to bid hopefully in the next month or two and completing that. Luckily, that one, because it is indoors, is not weather dependent. So if it lags a little bit further in the year, that we have no doubt that we can get that one done this year. Next on to the airport projects. So runway 1735, the design is complete on that one. We went out to bid, it has been awarded. I believe we are just waiting for grant funding from the FAA to clear so that we can actually break ground on that one. The apron and taxiway repair and striping project. Our on-call engineering firm is working on that. I believe we'll be through design through the end of this year. This will be a multi-year project, but for 2025, our goal is to get the design pretty much wrapped up with maybe some of that lagging into January and February. The gate electronics and motor replacement, that one is complete. We wrapped that one up, I think 2 weeks ago. So we have a final walkthrough and then we'll close that one out. And the next three, just equipment purchases. So we are looking through the statewide DES contracts and some of the other contracting group procurement that we use just to source the best prices for that equipment. And once we figure out what the best price is, we'll go ahead and move forward with those purchases. The real estate projects. So the only one on here is the Rance and Anthony's parking lot. We are currently in talks with the tenants to figure out the final scope on this. The main part of it is the grind and overlay of the parking lots in front of Anthony's and Rance. However, as we dig further into this project, we've started looking at the islands. There's some damage to the islands that should be replaced at the same time as a massive parking lot, as well as some of the trees that potentially may need to be removed because the roots are interfering with the parking lot. So as we get through the scoping, we will move this one forward, but we're currently in talks with the tenants to figure out timing. We don't want to impact the tenants. And unfortunately, construction season is right about when their busy seasons are. So I'm still hopeful this one will move forward in a meaningful way this year. But we're in talks with the tenants and making sure what's good for the port and good for the tenants. And then the last category, this is kind of the catch-all, the non-ops. So Marine Drive Northeast heavy. So this is from Olympia Ave to the Marine Terminal. Bids are due Friday. So we'll have bid opening on Friday and we will bring it to you. In fact, later this evening, I have a advisory for that contract. Waterfront Development Site D, this one is on hold. I'll be working with Mike throughout the year to figure out what the next steps are on this one and developing any kind of solicitation for that. The IT annual capital project, so this is just a placeholder as we have IT needs that come up, whether that's laptops, whether that's fiber. This is a placeholder to make sure that we have funds available for that. The IT fiber to port cyber security project is just wrapping up this week. That's out on the Marine Terminal. It's some conduit work, some fiber work. And so that one will be closing out in the near future. The building TI, so this actually goes with the last one, the building purchase. So the building TI is the renovation of the Dancing Goats project. We are working with Thomas Architecture Studios on the design of that. We're currently still getting conceptual designs, trying to get idea of the space programming. And once we have that all programmed in, we expect to get a 3D Revit model. At that point, we'd love to come brief the commission on it and let you know where we're at and get feedback. And we anticipate that probably in the next month. I'll get a more definitive timeline from Thomas Architecture Studios, but that's currently where we are with that one. The goal there is to have design complete by the end of this year, allowing us to go out and bid and break ground very early next year, with the hopes of being moved in completely by the end of next year.
Why are Marine Drive and waterfront development non-ops rather than being associated with one of the business lines?
That is a very good question. So previously, Marine Drive was allocated, I believe, to the marina. I should state that where they appear on here is not necessarily where they will hit when it's all said and done. So without getting too far in the detail, these all get coded to a certain GL. It's a 168 GL along with the project numbers. But when we close them out, that's when they actually get allocated to the different business units. So even though, you know, Marine Drive Northeast is currently showing as a non-ops, I imagine when we close this out and we start showing depreciation, that's when we'll probably split it up. I think East Bay it's probably half that road. You know, obviously it serves the Market District, it serves the marina, it serves North Point. So that's when, not that it doesn't matter where it's showing here, but when we actually close it out and we moved it to a fixed asset, that's when the placement is really double checked to make sure that it's hitting the right area. And then contingency equipment and projects. We'd put that in there, I think starting 2 years ago. We set aside some funding so that if projects came up during the year, there was funding allocated for that so that we could be opportunistic as things arose. And then the building purchase, which was an amendment to the capital projects, that was the actual purchase of the dancing goats, which was not on the original budget. That's kind of the 2025 capital projects. If you want, you can ask questions about those projects now or do it at the end.
Isn't this the end?
No. I've got so much more for you, but I'll be quick. So I tried to put together a quick 10-year capital project cost projection. So a couple caveats to this. One is none of these are finalized. Each year we go through and we determine which projects are going to move forward for the funding requests. I would also say that keep in mind that this has no Bud Inlet related costs in here. So any marina reconfiguration, any dredging that is not currently captured here. The second is sea level rise. It's not particularly captured here, so those costs would also be additional. The main, I guess, hope with this slide is just to show that, you know, our capital funding needs are quite significant. And when you look out even, you know, the first 4 years, this total is about $45 million worth of projects, which obviously is going to be difficult to try and fund all of them. So just the hope of this slide is just to show that we do have a lot of capital needs coming up. We are thinking about them. Anything past about year 3 and 4 is kind of just wishy-washy. You know, it's something we're anticipating. Once you get out to 10 years, it's really, hey, we know this project might be coming down the road. The costs are really just a guess at that point. So not to scare you, but this is kind of the long-term capital projection.
So recognizing most of the staff inherited the Bud Inlet project, how are we going to fulfill our obligations to proceed with that project?
So I don't want to speak for the environmental team, but I know we are looking at kind of all of the solutions. You know, we're looking at grant funding, appropriations, should we get to rare private investment, bonding. Nothing is off the table at this point. But I think, to be fair, I'm not 100% plugged in on Bud Inlet, but I think the goal now is just to understand what the scope of that project is. And once we understand what the scope is, any potentially liable partners, then we can really start to get that funding strategy. But I know they're already hard at work, you know, looking at all the different ways that could possibly be funded.
Whereas with sea level rise, given that we are not embracing retreat, like the built environment is going to create mitigation solutions through activating our real estate. So again, by activating our real estate, we're not only generating more revenue, but we are creating sea level rise response.
Absolutely. And that's something we are taking into consideration with any new builds that we have. Looking at where they're at on the floodplains and then making sure we are elevating where we can.
Well, and it's required, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, like this, so anyone who builds anything is going to be improving. And so I just think it's so critical for us as a commission to realize that if we don't do anything with our assets, we're not only delaying our revenue generation, we're delaying our environmental response. I mean, we're just.
Commissioner Evans Harding, are you saying we shouldn't sit on our assets?
Welcome. Then the last slide I have for you,
I like to use that.
we've talked a lot about maintenance plans here. I very much appreciate Chris saying he wants to be proactive instead of reactive. This cost projection comes from 2019. The port had OAC do an asset assessment. And so they looked at quite a few of our properties, the buildings and the site improvements, and they came up with basically a 10-year plan that started back in 2019 and projected forward 10 years. I wasn't around then. I imagine, right after 2019, when the pandemic hit, it put a screeching halt to addressing a lot of these issues. So these costs that you see are from 2019. I would imagine, as Afshin was showing some of those cost increases, that these projects have not gotten cheaper over time. The other thing I would say is that this only looks at some of our buildings and our parking lots. This does not take into account all of our roadways, does not take into account equipment, rolling stock, things of that nature. So this is kind of the first undusting of this report. I will be working with all the different business units to make sure that anything that they've been planning, because traditionally maintenance has gone through the business departments or the different departments to kind of plan their own maintenance, and making sure we get it built into one cohesive plan. But again, similar to the last slide, I would just caution that we are aware that we have a lot of maintenance needs, and they are getting more and more expensive, and we are formulating a plan of how we attack these, whether that's using in-house resources, whether that's looking for funding, but it is something we're looking into.
And something that when we're having our strategic planning, that we really need to be thinking about the whole time, right?
Absolutely.
James, just to follow up, what is your timeline for building that cohesive look? I think it's something we've been talking about.
Yeah, and actually, to hand this out first. So this.
Wow. That your notes on it? That's the good one. This is the one that was from 2019. Yeah. One that like packaged differently, like the engineering or whoever consultant created it.
Yeah, so this was from OAC. I have done some edits to this, trying to go through and determine which projects were accomplished before I got here, which maintenance projects were not real. Some of them, they anticipate a piece of equipment may have a 15-year life cycle. In all reality, some stuff could last 20 years, it could last 10. And I did try to build in some asphalt maintenance in here, and whether that's seal coating, crack sealing, things like that, just to get us a little bit closer. But again, I will be working with basically port wide on maintenance needs and trying to build this out timeline wise. I'm always working on it. I hesitate to give a date when it is complete. I would say every month it gets a little more accurate, but yeah, it'll be a living document in perpetuity, I would imagine. As we get close in the budgeting cycle, I think that's when we'll be as close as we can get. But again, that's not also accounting for things that arise during the year that maybe we didn't anticipate. So
Is there would you recommend that we go back and hire the company to do it? Should we prioritize this from a budget perspective to an outside consultant? Is that even possible? Or is the staff time still really high to coordinate with the consultant?
no, it's certainly possible. We were actually in contact with OAC and one of the members who did the survey. I think to do it right now would not be a good use of port funds. I think once we get, or once I get a better understanding of all the business units and kind of the maintenance that they do unseen on my end of the world and get that all kind of programmed in, it might help us give more of a targeted approach if we have someone come in, maybe help with updating the cost projections. You know, you can take, for example, 4% per year from 2019 and maybe get close. But yeah, I think internally, I would like to get a little bit more work done on it before I had an outside consultant come in, just to make sure that I'm getting better results.
Just because those graphs option showed, it's not really linear as far as the
That's the problem.
cost increases are disproportionate for certain.
It's interesting because it would seem to me that the leaders of the business line know what are the big things coming. And so it might be good to just have something that's not perfect, but just good. It
Absolutely.
helps us have a size of the box so that it would be good to have a work session in next quarter about sort of planning for financing and help inform the tools that we should be thinking about as a commission.
Yeah, absolutely. And the business units definitely, I mean, they're on top of their game. It's just really the getting it all into one master list that I'm working on, just trying to get it all coordinated into one and make sure that I'm
I
stepping.
think it's really important.
And as you have governance changes, as you will every other year, it allows the new commission to understand our existing obligations and then what is left for other initiatives, because I think if you don't understand that, you're like, let's do this, and it really helps to tailor what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I agree. And in looking at the pool of funds that the port has, once you start looking at all these costs in one document, it really goes down quickly.
And then the 2034 and the 2035, that's dredging. Is that what that's for? The marine?
No, this is no, it should not be any dredging on there. If it made it on there, it's because
Docks.
Marine terminal
Earthing,
oh, so this is actual berth rebuild. I'm pretty sure, without quoting me, I think those are berth rebuilds or major maintenance, not full rebuilds, but major maintenance on berths.
Not dredging, something on the.
No.
And I will say we had a conversation with the Corps this week and I asked about when they're just doing maintenance dredging. What the share would be, what the cost share would be for the port. And they said because it's a federally authorized channel, it's a federal project, there is no cost share. So for the Corps just doing maintenance dredging, there isn't a cost us.
But only if we're off the MOX list.
Right. Yeah, that's once we're off, once cleanup is done, yeah. And so the only expenses we have related to dredging, right, should be on cleanup related.
And then the only other question I had was, Alex, can you just quickly speak on what we talked about the other day about Trump and his Brazilian tariffs? If he doesn't chicken out and they continue, would it still be a good choice for us to build a new warehouse?
Yeah, that's a great point. So we have experienced some cost increases as sort of standard with the new warehouse. And we are at a point of, I think, heading into getting permits for the warehouse, but we've got this looming deadline of August 1st for 50% tariffs on cargo from Brazil. Our customer who imports things from Brazil has not said what they would plan to do if that remains in effect. The sort of challenging piece of this particular tariff is it's imposed for sort of political reasons. It has to do with the former leader in Brazil and the current federal administration wanting Brazil to let him go. And so don't know what will come of that, but I think what we'd like to do is be nimble when it comes to the second warehouse, because right now the primary occupant of our current warehouse is this customer that imports the Brazilian cargo. And if we lose that, does it make sense to forge ahead right now with that project? So we're looking at still forging ahead to get the permits for it for the second warehouse, but perhaps not actually go into construction unless we are confident that the tariffs won't be an impediment to the cargo coming in.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you, James. And it's been great hearing from each of the business lines. And thank you to the commissioners who've really pushed for this work session. With that, I'd like to adjourn so that we can have a quick break before our 5:50. This meeting is adjourned. So-